We are joined now by one Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntsy, what's going on, bud?
Not much. How you guys doing?
Well, hello. Welcome back to the world of the living, man. How was the break?
It was good. It was good. I'm happy to be back. Got a little breather. So, yeah, no complaints.
You just came back to some 4 and 5 stars on campus and a 4-star committing. I mean, no big deal, right?
Yeah, that and I don't know. There's I feel like the sports takes got worse when I was gone. And not because of me, but I flipped my phone on and it's there's a lot of WNBA on WNBA crime going on in my timeline, and I was really confused by the whole thing.
Yeah, well, we're guilty as charged because, man, I kind of had my feathers ruffled too, so I apologize.
No, you're fine.
I probably spent at least 2 segments talking about it. I was more mad at the media than I was the WNBA. Although
Okay.
the WNBA, it would be nice if they would embrace having a superstar. You know what I mean?
Yes. And also, somebody is coaching the Lakers next year, it appears, and that changes by the day.
Yeah,
that's what else I've learned.
I'm not. So I just wish I knew how to take what a good coach means to an NBA team. We tried to ask Anthony Tolliver this morning, and he kind of broke it down into it kind of matters the most in playoffs than any other time. But I don't know what to think. That'd be like asking me if Kirby Smart went to go coach the Steelers. I don't know. I mean, is that good? I just
what happened to JJ Redick though? I was that.
I would really lose my mind over that.
Quickly.
Yeah. So you know what's funny though with this whole coaching thing in the pros, this whole Micah Parsons and Zimmer thing is hilarious, right? Like Parsons says, yeah, I've said 20 words to Zim. I know he's coached a lot of good players, but he's never had a Micah. Can't wait to sit down. Like it's kind of passive aggressive, right? And Zim's response was, "Well, we're gonna do this my way." And I'm like, is that really how coaches do it in the pros? Is that? It just seems I don't know the value of coaching in the professional ranks.
It's probably different sport by it feels like the NFL is probably a little bit more important, right?
It appears that way.
And it maybe I'm wrong, but the NBA always just seemed like it was more about managing egos than anything. It's and I would guess that Major League Baseball is similar to that as well. It doesn't necessarily run itself, but it feels like there's a little bit less of the fingerprints on everything, every game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I'd push back a little on the NBA just because
he's an NBA honk.
No, I think there's way more scouting during the regular season that goes on. I don't know how much coaching in terms of player development and stuff like that actually happens, but I think there is a ton of scouting, especially other teams' offenses, to try and come up with game plans and things like that. But, if you're a player development coach, which that I think is one of the things that Hurley has been best at, I don't know at the professional level how much time the head coach has for that. There's other people on the staff that do that.
I mean, do you want him to get a bunch of young guys or
not if you're LeBron, probably, right?
Well, LeBron's almost done.
Okay, but if you're the Lakers, you're trying to get another one with LeBron, right? That's probably your goal here.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where Hurley doesn't necessarily if you got a really young team, Hurley would make a lot of sense in Oklahoma City, right? Yeah. Bunch of young dudes, develop them, you turn them into something. I mean, his roster at UConn, I think, is older than Oklahoma City's roster, but so I would just push back on the NBA a little bit there. That's all I'll say. But I agree that Major League Baseball managers don't do anything.
Yeah, that's fair. I am so far out on the NBA. I'll go with your premise. It sounds good to me.
Oh, it's certainly not like the Mariners and A's at the Coliseum or anything.
Well, I'm out on that too. I'm done with that. As are most people.
Well, you got a split so far. Are you already fast forwarding to Toronto or what?
Well, they're the A's are a plucky little group. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of I haven't really been all in on this season. So there's that. I got my cell T-shirt. That's about as in as I'm getting on the A's.
I think that's a good plan there. Yeah,
Michael Bruntz here for not trying to make it 2 in a row today.
I mean, listen, you're not. I feel like you kind of have to emotionally hedge for yourself a little bit there, where you don't want to, get too involved in somebody like the A's.
Bruntzy, how many questions? Well, you've been gone, so maybe none. But how often do you feel like you have to answer the question, "What should Nebraska's baseball program be or expect"?
Frequently.
Yeah.
Basically,
yeah.
I don't know. It's weird that I think sometimes that basketball is this way too. Like it feels like any time that Nebraska and any program has like a measure of success, it gets viewed through like this football prism, and like where you're kind of hanging on every game. And I think as the season kind of wore on this spring, I felt like those questions came up a lot every time Nebraska dropped a midweek. Like, what do you legitimately expect this program's ceiling or expectation should be? And I don't know that I have a good answer. I have an idea. I don't know. I just think I don't think that you can view Nebraska baseball in the summer of 2024 through the same lens as you did in the summer of 2005. And I think that's hard for some people.
Okay, expound for me. Just because of the landscape of college baseball, the television money, NIL,
moving from the Big 12 to the Big 10,
capturing lightning in a bottle, like what? Help me.
All of it. I mean, I think. I mean, you kind of went down you went down my list. No, but I mean, like, you're in a significantly different conference. I mean, the last time Nebraska was in the College World Series, the Big 12 had 3 teams in the College World Series. Baylor, Nebraska, and Texas were all there that year. And you're in a league that, for better or for worse, you're kind of who is in your backyard, right? Like you're not necessarily the company that you keep, but you're kind of in that neighborhood. And, I think, the game to me has felt like it's moved much more, to an SEC dominated landscape than it has been in the past. I mean, I'm not saying that you lessen the expectations, and you should by all means be able to line up and beat Summit League teams on Wednesdays. But I just think it's a much more nuanced conversation about kind of what the expectation is. And I think too, the university kind of needs to figure out how all in they're going to be on it from an administrative point of view, because I think that's an important piece of it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a limit somewhat to, the fact that Nebraska was in the conversation to host a regional as late as they were this year. I think that's a good step. I mean, I think, Nebraska kind of needs to make that next step as a program where, regional berths become more of a regularity than they have been. But it's a tough fight. I mean, it's just so much is stacked against northern teams right now in college baseball, the way things are.
Are you speaking more to like maybe not necessarily Gilmore's rant from Coastal, but the ability to bring in the players that you need to win? Because when you say how all in you want administration to be, I'm assuming it's not just upgrades at Haymarket, right?
Well, I mean, that's a big piece of it. I mean, when was the last time you guys saw Nebraska baseball's clubhouse in a recruiting video?
Yeah.
Ever? I mean, it's
good point.
Like there's fixes that can be made over there that are long overdue, and need to be made. And I think Troy Dannon has a good eye for that kind of stuff, just based on kind of what I've been hearing. But
one more year, liquor sales will help too.
a full year. They got about $12,000 a game. That's not nothing.
No,
So,
I'm being serious.
yeah, and I honestly, based on the lines that they had up by the press box, I was a little surprised it was only 12,000. Like I felt like Nebraska fans were trying to do their part. So, yeah, I mean that's part of it. The NIL piece of it is important too. I mean, it's just tough because it's not you're not going to see the same return on it in baseball as you would in football and basketball. And Nebraska and teams in the North are up against teams with much bigger war chests for those impact transfers. So that's kind of all part of it.
So, Bruntz, let's say Nebraska does control some of the things they can control, whether it's updating Haymarket, getting some better facilities, whatever the case is, right? Do you think they can get to a place, given the challenges that you laid out, where hosting a regional is maybe not the every year expectation, but that's more of a norm? I think DB and I said earlier this week, like, okay, if you're in a regional 7 or 8 out of every 10 years, I think that's a reasonable goal. And you would want to be hosting what, like half of those? Is that attainable?
Based on recent history, that would be a bit of a stretch.
Wow.
You look at the teams that host. You got to really thread the needle pretty well if you're a northern team. I mean, you either got to win a lot of games or you got to schedule really hard and win those games. And I think that was the one thing that Nebraska, to its credit, did this year, was they scheduled the right teams early on and they won those games. And that's something that for 15 years this program's really struggled to do. So I don't know. I mean, it feels like the hosting conversation, like, yes, you can take care of your own business, but there's a lot of other factors that kind of fall into that too. And I would probably lean towards more of the expectation being how many times are you getting to the tournament, not necessarily.
Yeah, that's kind of where
if you're hosting, because it feels like there's a lot that's out of your hands, and too, I guess maybe it plays to Nebraska's favor and to northern schools a little bit. But I mean, if they're not just going to go straight RPI on deciding that, maybe that helps a little bit more than before, where it was like you basically had to be in the top 20 RPI wise to even have to be in that conversation.
Who do you think has the toughest decision on kind of their clash, or should they stay or should they go moment, based on how the season finished on Nebraska's roster?
In terms of pro prospects and things like that?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in my mind, I would not expect Josh Caron back. I mean, I feel like he made himself a lot of money down the stretch.
And you get the sense like that's who he's really capable of being, right? Because that's what it's got to boil down to.
I mean, the thing that he had not done during his time at Nebraska was he had not kind of held those numbers through a whole season.
Yeah.
And from where he was last year, not only as a hitter, but I mean defensively, he improved significantly from what he had been. So I mean, I think he's probably gone. I'm trying to think in my head, who else probably falls in that category too. I don't know. It's going to be interesting because I think Nebraska is going to have to get pretty active in the portal with replacing some key roles. So, yeah, I without having a list in front of me, I'm probably going to leave somebody off. But I mean, I would expect a guy like Caron, certainly would probably be moving on.
Well, they may not have to look too far. There's a bunch of guys looking for new places to play up in Omaha. So
there are.
That's incredible. That is incredible what's happened locally.
Yeah, no, it's for better or for worse, Nebraska has relationships with a lot of those guys. So I mean, you at least can probably get the phone call answered a little bit quickly. So, but yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, you don't kind of get the numbers going into the portal publicized like you do in basketball or football, but man, like you got like 10 guys go in, like what do you, that's it's a 30-year roster right there. So it's going to be fascinating to see how Creighton handles that, because I don't recall a situation like that too often.
You know what's even more interesting is that's a team that just went out and did, I won't say outside of the weekends, but like just did work. Like they own Nebraska, and this was going on with internally. Like it's just, I mean, baseball is already a hard enough sport to not be bringing any of that stuff to the table. I mean, maybe that was part of the problem
on the weekends. Yeah.
Spending more time with each other, right?
Yeah.
No,
no, it's easier on a one-off than it is on a road trip for sure.
You know,
to deal with each other if you don't like them that much.
Your hitting coach was there for 7 years, and he takes a job going to Minnesota. And, I mean, thank God that news broke yesterday, because my professional wisdom, Bruntz, I was like, oh, yeah, and without Gandasi there anymore. And they're like, wait, that's not official. Sorry. But isn't that weird? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, it's just such an odd situation with like how it's being handled, and you know, the coaching aspect of it, and the timing of everything. Like I get it. Like you probably want to be somewhere that's stable and you know what's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, you know, Creighton's issue was not the talent on the roster. I mean, they've got guys on that staff that are going to be coveted by big schools.
Yeah, one in particular.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, that's kind of the bizarro Nebraska, right? They took care of everybody in the midweeks, and, you know, weren't able to get it done on the weekend.
Bruntz, as a guy that I think is really interesting is Gabe Swanson, and I think he is he going to have a decision to make after what we saw here in the last few weeks, or like how do you weigh what happened over the course of the season versus kind of what you see that top end the last few weeks or month or so?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one, because, you know, which is the real him, right? Because he did it for a year last year, put it together for a couple weeks this year. You know, total package wise, I mean, that, you know, he can definitely hit. That's for sure. He's got the power, but, you know, is he, you know, a good enough defender to kind of rise in that conversation? I don't know. We'll see. But I mean, the last couple of weeks that he had, I mean, for as lousy as his regular season was and everything he put up with in terms of, you know, having to live up to expectations last year and things like that. I mean, I was really happy to see it kind of played out for him. I would be a little bit surprised if there's a decision there to make. Because, you know, I guess in my mind, you maybe want to see, you know, if you're a professional team, you want to see if that's, you know, which is which. I mean, maybe he's a guy you take a late flyer on, because obviously the power numbers are there, but I don't know. He's the one guy that I don't really have a good handle on in terms of how he's viewed. I haven't really seen him pop up in a lot of lists and things like that. You know, I also haven't really been looking based, you know, off the last couple of weeks of the season. But can you guys remember a heater like that any Nebraska athlete's been on?
No. Like, I'm serious. I even I thought Casey.
Yeah,
that's the first one I thought.
Like
that,
the end of last year.
Yep. That was really the only stretch I could think of where it's like, if you're just penciling a guy in for a home run, like you're penciling a guy in to hit 5 threes, that was this. I was trying to think. I even went multiple sports.
Yeah, I can't come up with one.
So how about some of the balls that he was hitting? Like, that was the thing that was getting me.
Yeah, it's not like he was getting meatballs.
It's like he
got
did
on his shins.
Yeah. To leave the yard.
Yeah, he was doing some Vlad Guerrero stuff out there.
Like, guys don't even hit those balls down and in like that.
They probably shouldn't even swing at him, to be honest.
I was like, what is like that thing had to just
funny though, like, if you think back to the spring, like, I mean, he was hitting like $150 for most of the year, and every time that he would get a hit, and he would be in the lineup the next game. Like, the coaching staff, I think, kind of did everything they possibly could to give him a chance to get going.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was even the game they went down to Kansas and lost. It was like the 11-7 game or whatever. Like he had a single in that game that looked pretty good. And I was like, okay, that's going to be enough to keep him in the lineup for the whole weekend. Cause I mean, that's the potential he has, but it just, you could never get that wick to light. So it finally happened. But I can't recall any kind of run like that, just out of nowhere, seemingly.
Bruntz, couple minutes left here with you. Want to switch over to football recruiting for a second. Obviously, the commitment of Jamarion Parker was the big news yesterday. Just general thoughts on Parker, and if you think this is the start of another big June for Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, if you've sat and kind of watched his film, you get it. I mean, you see it. And, to me, he was a guy that feels like he has a really big senior year ahead of him. Like the numbers were already good, but I feel like he's the kind of guy that has the potential to really blow up, even more than he already did. I mean, he had, a number of big offers, but, he has that kind of big play potential. And, I think for Nebraska, the running back spot has kind of cried out for a player like that for a while. They've had guys that, you could kind of ascribe those types of things, types of characteristics to, but I mean, he really has it. And I think you have to give Nebraska credit for the way that they recruited him. I mean, they made him a priority from the jump. And I mean, it feels like for the past decade, we've been discussing how Nebraska can possibly get back into St. Louis in a major way. And that was a big win. I mean, I think you have to give a lot of credit to EJ Barthel. You have to give a lot of credit to Keith Williams. I mean, I think he's doing a lot
I
of
agree
work,
with you.
a lot of work behind the scenes. And I've talked to former Nebraska players who are involved in high school football in St. Louis, and they talk to Keith Williams a lot.
Yep.
And he's really dialed in down there and in the state of Missouri. And that's an area that Nebraska has spent a lot of hours and a lot of manpower trying to, spread the flag there. So this was a big win and one that was a long time coming, because I think they've really made it a point to make Missouri a priority and to show that they're going to continue to recruit there hard.
The string that those guys are on, kind of like a linebacking core with Callahan and Genta and Avery Gossett and Keith Williams, it's been so refreshing to have that singular purpose. It's almost silly.
Yeah, I mean, they're very organized. They've got a really good plan, and it's, I mean, you know this, Damon. It's not ever just one coach that's recruiting a kid, it's all hands on deck, and they're gonna, if they've got a chance at a kid, they're gonna take their best shot. And I think with Parker, it was just the relationship piece of it was so big. And I, like I said, I mean, it was a big recruiting win. And I think it, to your point, kind of flexed a little bit the work they're doing over there right now.
That's Michael Bruntz. We'll talk to you again next week, Bruntzy.
Thanks, guys. Take care.